We are going to be once again in the Gospel of John this morning, chapter 9. That's a typo. It's 26 to 38. That's unfortunate. It annoys me. Oops.
Should I know the bulletin?
I know the bulletin was right. I didn't even notice it in my own PowerPoint. It's my fault. There, now it's 26 to 38. I don't know why you had to mention that the bulletin was right, as if there was some criticism earlier by some mean people, not by me. All right. So what does it mean to be an unsung hero? And we're actually talking about this topic this morning downstairs about veterans whose contributions and whose defense of the country is forgotten. Men who we even sometimes they miss a military funeral because nobody knows. They don't say anything. So what does it mean to be an unsung hero? Well, how about this? How about standing up for the right thing and risking your reputation, maybe even your life, without anyone even remembering or knowing your name? Would that work? Would that qualify you as an unsung hero? History is full of such people whose contributions are forgotten, were not recorded, nobody knew about them. Many of them public servants like firefighters and cops and soldiers, but many ordinary people as well, who did the right thing when the opportunity arose. We're going to see a similar episode this morning in the third message about the blind man healed by Jesus. We'll pick it up in verses 26 and 27 of chapter 9. It says, "Then they asked him, 'What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?' He answered, 'I told you already and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?'" Now these questions follow after our text from the previous 2 weeks, when the blind man said to those questioning him, "One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see." You see, this man was being questioned by the Pharisees. Who is Jesus? Who is he really? Do you know who he is? Do you know how he did what he did? What did he do? They kept questioning him. He didn't really know the answers. So they come at him one more time, and they say to him, "What did he do to you? Run through it again." Now this is despite the fact that this man has already testified to it. He has already been questioned. He's already answered it. His neighbors have already come forward and said, "He was blind. Jesus did this. Now he can see, explained it, etc." They already know. But they want him to go over the details again. Now he's not a murderer sitting in the investigation room where the cops are going to ask him to go over it again and again, hoping that he'll trip up, hoping that he won't have his alibi right, that he'll make a mistake. That's not the kind of man they're talking to. This is a man who was born blind. But this very day, he was healed by Jesus. Put yourself in his shoes for a moment. Wouldn't you be a little bit frustrated by now? Wouldn't you be asking yourself, why are people so intent on ruining the man who healed me? This man took my life and gave it new meaning and purpose, and yet they want to destroy him. What's really going on here? What have I gotten myself into? Unwittingly, this man has found himself in the middle of a major power play and theological discussion amongst these big-time people. And yet, he responds beautifully. Look what he says. He says, first of all, "I told you already." Wouldn't they have stopped bothering him if they believed him? When you believe what someone tells you, do you ask him to repeat it and go over it again and again? No. You just believe him. The only reason the questioning continues is that they hope that he'll say something they can discredit him with. They hope that he'll say something by which they can discredit Jesus. And so they say, let's go over it again. Maybe there's something we missed. Maybe there's a way to discredit Jesus that we didn't see. And then he asks the fateful question, and I love this question. Do you want to become his disciples too? Now, this question is a turning point in this incident. From prior to this question, it was more like a passion debate. They were trying to find out the truth. They were going back and forth. There were division amongst the Pharisees themselves as to what to say about Jesus. But after this question, their response is going to be hostility. Now I wonder, how did he ask the question? We don't get that in the text. We don't get how he said that. Because you can say this one of two ways. You could say, oh, do you want to become disciples too? As if you are sincere. Or you can say it the way I probably would have said it after being bothered by these guys so long. Oh, do you want to be his disciples too? With a little bit of sarcasm, with a little bit of something in your voice. I have no idea which path this man chose in this case. But regardless of it, they didn't respond very well to it. It was, after all, the question that every man faces when he considers the teachings and the miracles and the claims of Jesus Christ. The question is, do you want to be his disciple? And it's not a simple thing to say that. You can't just say, well, I kind of like Jesus, I'm a fan. Like kids these days on Facebook, they just click, I like that, I'm a fan of that. Because there's no serious commitment to that. But that's not what we're talking about. To become a disciple requires commitment. Disciples had to literally follow their teacher in this day. Where he went, you went. What he taught, you listened and accepted. So let's see how the Pharisees respond in verses 28 and 29. It says, then they hurled insult at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. Well, there's that moment where discussion becomes argument. You ever had that happen to you? You're talking to someone, you're having a good discussion, and you think everything is going smoothly, and all of a sudden you find yourself in an argument? Most people have a question or a comment that really pushes their buttons. Any one of you have one of those? Somebody says something and man, maybe it's about politics or sports or religion or who knows what, right? That one thing. When someone says that, all right, now it's go time. Now we're not debating, now we're arguing. Well, this was it for the Pharisees. To ask them if they wanted to be disciples of Jesus, that was going too far. But why did this particular question upset them so much? Why did they care that he asked them that? Well, let me give you a couple of parallels, at least in their minds. Would you go up to Peyton Manning and say, Peyton, I know you've won a Super Bowl, I know you've been MVP, but we've got this high school phenom and he is really good. I think he could teach you a thing or two about throwing the deep pass. You wouldn't, would you? Would you walk up to Justin Verlander and say, you know what, the Tigers just drafted this 17-year-old kid out of high school, and I think he can show you how to pitch a better fastball? Yeah, you wouldn't do that. I mean, holy cow. The Pharisees felt insulted because they felt that Jesus was beneath them. How can he teach us anything? Let's compare the two in their minds, Jesus versus the Pharisees. Well, Jesus in their minds was an uneducated country bumpkin with no money and no position and not much of anything going for him. Who are we, the Pharisees? We're the best trained, the best connected, the most important religious leaders in this whole country. And you think we want to be his disciple? That's laughable. They probably, if they hadn't gotten so upset, would have laughed in the blind man's face at the suggestion. They've come here to sit in judgment over Jesus, not to be taught by him. So what do they say when they respond? We are disciples of Moses, they say. An appeal to tradition. And what purpose does it serve? It serves three purposes. Number one, it establishes the credentials of the Pharisees. We are followers of the man who gave us the law. We are followers of Moses. They get out their little card that says, see, followers of Moses. They prove their worth. Number two, it highlights the perceived lack of authority for the teachings of Jesus. In other words, it portrays Jesus as being against the law. It makes him out to be a rebel instead of a reformer. He's against the law. He's against Moses. And lastly, it's a way of silencing any attempts at reform. How is anyone going to object to those who say that they are following the laws of Moses? Where do you go from there? You don't have anything to say. They also said to him, "We know that God spoke to Moses." And I imagine they said that with more than a little bit of sarcasm, or more than a little bit of, "Hey, we know God spoke to Moses." But as for this man, that's what's unsaid. Ain't nobody telling me God spoke to him. That's what they're not saying. Have you ever read the book of Exodus? You're familiar with it, right? Did you notice how little attention the people paid to Moses while he was in the business of leading God's people? At the time, they certainly knew God had spoken to Moses, didn't they? When he came down from the mountain and his face was shining, don't you think they knew he was speaking face to face with God? And they didn't listen to him. Evidently, it's easier to honor God's messenger when he isn't around anymore. When he's not here to make sure you're listening to what God has to say. We do that, don't we? Oh, we're the party of Lincoln. We're the party of FDR. Isn't that what the two parties say? Then we try to uphold them. Well, they're not around here to say, "Yeah, I'm not really a fan of your policies, though." So it's easy to call your hero into question when he's not here. Well, we all know Jesus is following a long tradition of prophets from God who were insulted and abused when they tried to bring a message of repentance to God's people. It's easier to find a prophet who was ignored than a prophet that was listened to. That Jesus